going to go over how to address a counterargument in your technology essay. So the goal of the counterargument and rebuttal paragraph is to show why people might disagree with your position and then challenge their disagreement. It's a lot like the rebuttal segment of your debate, in which you responded to your opposition by explaining the points they made and then attacking them. So as an example, let's say your claim is negative toward the role of technology in education. So my claim is that technology hurts education because it reduces our sense of information to simple, Googleable facts instead of real knowledge. Next, I'm going to consider what my opponents would say, how they might disagree with me. I'm thinking that my opponents might disagree with the idea that our sense of information is reduced to Googleable facts. I think they might say that technology actually frees our mind from facts and details we don't need, that are unnecessary, so that we can focus on bigger ideas. I think they would argue that we reach real knowledge by learning to solve problems for ourselves. The more time we have to focus on these bigger problems, the better off we will be. So I think they would likely consider how technology can help us learn more effectively. Once you have a sense of what the counterargument might be, then you need to fully consider it. You should consider how they would make their point using evidence. So you will then find evidence that you feel your opposition would use. Many of you have already picked out a potential quote. You will then analyze that evidence as your opposition would. Here's what that sounds like. Remember, my claim is that technology hurts education because it reduces our sense of information to simple, Googleable facts instead of real knowledge. Some might disagree, saying that having facts readily available frees up our thinking to deal with bigger problems. In fact, a study by the International Society for Technology and Education found that when used in collaborative learning methods and leadership that is aimed at improving the school through technology planning, technology impacts achievement in content area learning, promotes higher order thinking and problem-solving skills, and prepares students for the workforce. In other words, when used well, technology allows us to pay attention to more difficult problems and think more deeply in school. This suggests that integrating technology more completely in school will have positive outcomes on the way our minds work. So notice that I've introduced an opposing claim, and I've laid out how they would analyze their evidence using the full CECA process of context, evidence, citation, and analysis. So now that I've introduced and explained the perspective of the opposing argument, I now have two options for how to respond. I can choose to use a logical challenge, or I can choose to respond with counter-evidence. The first option is countering with a logical challenge. Your job is to challenge their logic in one of these ways. You can consider, is their evidence weak? Does it come from a small study, or is it outdated or limited to a small section of society? Is the source too biased or too uninformed to be credible? Or is the logic of the argument weak? Does the other side's reasoning not make sense or fall short? So I have my counterclaim CECA, and my job is to attack the logic of the analysis that integrating technology more completely in school will have positive outcomes. I am going to argue that their reasoning is impractical. So I said, however, it is so challenging for teachers to coach students to make the best use of technology and to avoid its many distractions that this ideal version of technology in education rarely, if ever, achieves its theoretical potential. So I've responded to their counterclaim by showing that their analysis is not practical. The other way to counter is to use counter-evidence. So you will bring up counter-evidence that shows your side is stronger, and then you will write a CECA for your evidence that explains why your evidence outweighs the other side. So here's what that looks like. Here again, we have their claim that integrating technology more completely in school will have positive outcomes on the way our minds work. I found evidence that I think I can use to counter that. However, this relies on broader changes in education that may or may not be spurred by using technology. As reported on edweek.org, a mountain of evidence indicates that teachers have been painfully slow to transform the ways they teach, despite that massive influx of new technology into their classrooms. The student-centered, hands-on, personalized instruction envisioned by EdTech proponents remains the exception to the rule. In other words, despite technology's potential to improve education, it is largely not having that effect. Therefore, Arguments for technology in school are weak until education itself has transformed enough to actually make this potential a reality. And this transformation, not technology, is what would actually improve education. So I have found evidence that I think outweighs the point they made. To recap, there are two ways to counter. You can rebut with a logical challenge, or you can rebut using counter-evidence. Notice that in either scenario, you first choose evidence that the other side would support and write a CECA for that evidence. You then choose a method of responding to their perspective.